What is the future going to look like? What are the computers of the future going to look like? What are they going to be doing in this society that we live in? I don't think that's more than a part of the question that we really want to answer. I don't believe that predicting the future is really what we're about. After all, we ourselves, or at least the younger ones among us, are going to be a part of the future. So, being a part of it, our task is not really to predict it. Our task is to design it, to design a sustainable and acceptable world, and then to devote our efforts to bringing that future about. It is a task we have to face, because we're not observers of the future, we're actors, who, whether we wish it or not, by our actions and our very existence, are going to determine the future's shape. Well, what are the conditions of acceptability of the future we want to design? First, we must find a way for living at peace with all of nature, not destroying the bases for the survival of all of us. Second, we must find a way for sharing broadly and fairly the outputs of our productive efforts of all kinds, no matter how ample or limited these outputs are, in a sustainable world. Third, we must, as a necessary condition for maintaining any standard of fairness, find some way of greatly mitigating and, if possible, eliminating the innumerable and passionate divisions of we from they.
And for myself, I'm again one of these types of characters. My style is to deal with a single problem, namely the nature of the human mind. That is the one problem that I have cared about throughout my scientific career, and it will last me all the way to the end. Now, what is this question? For me, this question is, how can mind occur in the human mind occur in the physical universe? We now know that the world is governed by physics. We now understand the way biology nestles comfortably within that. The issue is, how will mind do that as well? And the second part of this is, this answer must have the details. I've got to know how the gears clank and how the pistons go and all the rest of that detail. That's that question, Ryan. It's not the same as a bunch of other questions. For instance, it's not the same as what is the nature of intelligence. That is the AI question. And although I have been associated with AI for a large part of my life, that's not the question that drives me. This is the question that drives me, and they're not the same. And another fellow by the name of Oliver Selfridge came to Rand. I was at Rand at the time, and he talked about their system. They were producing a system on what was called the memory test computer for Whirlwind, and they were building a pattern recognition system which had several loops of self-adaptation in it. And I listened, and this wasn't a big seminar. He just got in a room with about 3 or 4 of us and described this effort for a couple of hours. And I listened to that, and I knew, okay, this is a genuine conversion experience. I walked out of that place. What I knew actually was that computers can do any kind of complex processing, including learning, abstraction, you name it. That was the collection of mechanisms there were sufficiently rich that we were on our way, okay? It was indeed a conversion experience. I went into the office of my colleague, Cliff Shaw, and I repeated verbatim practically what Oliver Selfridge had said in the previous hour. Then I went home that weekend and I designed a couple of whole systems from scratch, and I've never turned back since.
So, thank you very much to our 2 opening speakers. They are the heart and soul of artificial intelligence at Carnegie Mellon University. And as the decades have gone by, their vision, which springs out of their membership of the Dietrich College of GSAA, now TEPA, and the School of Computer Science, has infused itself through Carnegie Mellon in a way that has led to us being such a highly sought-after institution these days. And for folks like myself, Marshall, Manuela, and many other people. We feel like we're the sort of intellectual grandchildren of these giants. And of course, we feel kind of small and humble in comparison. After these giants set us all up, we had the heroic folks like Alan Perlis, Nico Haberman, sitting in the audience today, Raj Reddy, Takeo Kanadi, who came along and helped build out Carnegie Mellon as the place which really studies the nature of intelligence and how to harness it for the good of the human race. So we now feel the responsibility to make sure that we keep going this way. And we are. On campus, you're seeing many, many things happening. But now really is the time of artificial intelligence. It's the time when hundreds of thousands of engineers, students around the world are trying to use it, mostly for good, trying to find new paths. It's our job at Carnegie Mellon to lead the way. And that is what we're trying to do today in this CMU AI discussion. So very briefly, as we all know, it started in the 50s and 60s with folks like Herb and Alan asking, what are the essential characteristics of an intelligent system? They perceive, they decide, and they act. How does all of this work? Now, what subsequently happened after the big successes of things like job shop scheduling and chess playing in the mid to late 1990s, we got into a little bit of trouble because that decide loop found that it didn't have models of the world with which to predict what happens next and thus to optimize on. That was when, courtesy of some of the greats at CMU, people like Jaime Carbonell and Tom Mitchell, we really pushed hard on the nascent field of machine learning. We at CMU did a very statistical approach to machine learning because the computer scientists and the statisticians actually like each other. So that has enabled now the growth, not just within campus, but generally of practical artificial intelligence, which can now make decisions based on understanding the world. So this, when folks like Manuela, myself, Krishnan, Bob Damon go out to the world to talk about artificial intelligence and artificial intelligence strategy at CMU, this is the picture we always show of, you see that green block shows the parts to do with learning and how it's made up of many components, some of which require expertise from the very bottom of the hardware stack, new forms of memory, such as the work being done by Franz Franchetti in ECE, all the way up through to sophisticated statistical inference, which doesn't get screwed up by the huge problems of things like multiple hypothesis testing, which we now believe has ruined about 50% of all the comp bio papers published in the last decade. Now above that, and this is where I'm so excited where we at CMU are, is more. It's not just about machine learning. In a decade where so many institutions are proudly opening their institutes of data science, studying the green box, we, through our heritage and through the leadership of the people that came before us, are asking, well, what do we build on top of that to enable, ultimately, autonomous systems and systems which are friends and helping of humans. Now, while we're doing this, there's two other sort of big things which cover all of these questions on this map. The first is the policy, the societal impact, the question of ethical design of systems, and the separate question of design of ethical systems. These are things which actually you're seeing hundreds, maybe thousands of angsty white papers being written by think tanks around the world at the moment. And again, if I want to trust one place which is actually going to answer those questions instead of just doing angsty questions, it would be Carnegie Mellon. Similarly, as we all know, there is an international game and a national game and a local economic game on who has the talent, who is producing the folks who are going to be looking way ahead. Where are we going to find the future Herb Simons and Alan Newells at? And again, I think it's our mission at Carnegie Mellon to be the place which has a good chance of doing that. The other advantage we have at Carnegie Mellon is this map is big, very hard, and very complex. There are systems which are built on top of other systems, which are built on top of other systems. And if you're building a low-level piece of technology or a low-level machine learning algorithm, you want to reach up and find the folks who are going to be able to demonstrate how important your new piece of technology is. So the fact that at Carnegie Mellon we can do links between our colleges, between our different job descriptions. We don't care whether you're an undergraduate or a university professor. Everyone is allowed and encouraged to collaborate on making things work. And for this kind of stack, that's exactly what we need. This is a campus-wide opportunity for us, where we've somehow, and again, I credit the giants who came before us, we've got a culture here where we respect other academic disciplines, even if they're not our own, and we, to a large part, avoid the petty academic rivalry between different departments of sub-institutions. So, there's many parts of CMU's technology organizations, basically the things in engineering and science, engineering and computer science, which can take part in. And don't freak out about exactly where we've drawn these things on this picture. We're just trying to illustrate the strength that we have here for building this. Beyond the technology groups, though, when it comes to science and the humanities, we're very strong. We have the most AI-ish philosophy department I've ever heard of. We have the psychology and CNBC and Brain Hub a real nexus of strength for understanding human intelligence, and then many other parts of the campus. Then on top of that, we have societal things. Kyron Skinner's new Institute for Politics and Strategy is a wonderful place for actually thinking through some of the game theoretic questions about what happens when nation states use AI against each other. And in education, we have many parts of this campus concerned with helping rapidly get technology education to middle schools and high schools through the use of educational technology, and to help folks who are mid-career, who have not currently been trained up in AI, to at least have a chance of an on-ramp into our magical world. Manuela is going to announce something really cool in education. And so, overall, we cover this map pretty nicely. What are we going to do here today? Today is about focus. And this, I now realize this is ridiculously sinister for an AI presentation. Okay. This is a high-resolution image of an iris taken from about 80 feet away by a system built by Marius Savidis in electrical computing engineering and his students a couple of years ago, which is wonderful. It can help us with all kinds of safety issues, but it's also a little terrifying. Anyway, today, here's what's going to happen. After this meeting, you're going to get a structured set of questions. Questions will be things like, which area that you've heard about in AI today would you like to extend your own expertise in? Would you like to look for collaborations in? Another kind of question will be, what is your core thing? What do you feel like you're potentially offering to the rest of campus? Or, and this is extremely important for us, when we talk to external agencies or external companies or local non-profits, what kind of external organization do you want to make contact with to help you get your ideas out into the world, or to help you get hold of data to make your ideas work better? So this meeting today is pretty relaxing for you. You don't have to do much except during the meeting or after the meeting, I beseech you to send me email. Just a short email saying, I'm interested, or anything else you like. We will use that to then send out a structured survey for feedback from everyone about whether they would like to contribute, and how we should be organizing ourselves across the campus for this to work as well as possible. So you can relax, don't fall asleep, but don't feel like there's a lot at stake in this meeting. This is interesting, but we're not going to have enough time for a big discussion amongst ourselves today. What you must do, though, is give me your email address so we can then send you structured questions, which we will then distribute to everyone who is here. The way we're going to run this is you're going to hear from some of the founders of CMU AI. Then, just to get your mind focused on the kinds of big possible things that bits of the campus could get together and do, you're going to hear from a few folks run under a panel by Manuel Veloso that talk about examples of big AI moonshots that are possible. That's to get your intellectual juices flowing. After that, we will have an open question and answer session where we just talk about, when the survey goes out, what questions should we ask in it? What are the major things that we're missing currently? What are the things that members of the campus may aspire to or fear about what we're going to do here? So we will have, if all goes according to plan, half an hour for live discussion here. We'll take copious notes and we'll use that along with the structured information we receive from you. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay, very good. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to Professor Veloso, who is going to introduce some aspects of what's actually going on right now in Campus for AI.
Where is it? Just that one. Go to the next slide, and then one more. One more. Okay. So I'm actually going to tell you a little bit about some kind of concrete kind of projects we have been following with just 3 slides or 4 slides explaining to you this concept of AI. I do have to thank Andrew and the CMU AI effort of everyone to have put together those little 2 videos of Herb Simon and Alan Newell. And you have to realize that, I keep telling this to the students, Newell and Simon, our Newell and Simon Hall, Newell and Simon existed. They were people here. And so I kind of listened to these NSH, and I say, NSH, God, these were people. They had a big influence in all of us. And therefore, it's like a homework assignment tonight to go and to actually go to Google these 2 men and try to learn more about them if possible. And this was just a few items. I mean, just a little bit of a touch of what they were. And let me just mention to you this thing about these perception, cognition, and action that we try to emphasize a lot as being some part of the AI story. In fact, this was in, I believe, December of '91, the same year that Alan Newell gave, at the same time that he gave his lecture that you saw here. Alan Newell passed away July '92. In December of '91 was a lot of interactions in the celebrated Wynn Hall, and Jaime was there, I was there, Andrew was there. We were all around these people, and Alan Newell went to the board, and I distinctively remember him drawing on these, with the big chalk on the blackboard in 5409, he wrote AI, AI. He was really very like that, full of energy. And he picked up this thing and wrote in a big box, perception, in another big box, cognition, and in another big box, action. And he said, this is what AI is about. We cannot be working just on planning, just on vision, just on this, just on that. This is about putting it all together. And somehow this was after he had given his lecture on what makes a scientist, and that kind of like a science, a direction chooses you, you don't choose a direction. And for me, that was the aha of my career, deciding this is it. I'm just going to work on this perception, cognition, and action. And I've been developing these fully autonomous robots for an eternity. Since I finished my PhD, while the web was all the big hype of the day, I still worked only on these robots because I can hear Alan Ewell saying, this is what matters, language, all of this together. And I tell you, we didn't have in those days cell phones that we could just take a picture of that board. We didn't have like videos that we could just videotape Alan Ewell talking, but it remained on people. And for me, I've been doing this with little iBos, with little small robots that play soccer, currently with Peppers, with Baxters. Any robot, I'm trying to make them intelligent. And so in some sense, this is the AI story, is trying also to put this all together. So these cobots, for example, which probably you have seen before, which eventually, can you take the sound off here? Exactly. So that you have seen before at CMU are an example of something that only exists also at Carnegie Mellon, which are these robots that move in our indoor environments, completely autonomous. Nobody's joysticking them. I did have a reporter that came to CMU one day, years ago, when we started playing soccer, who literally looked behind all the doors of my lab to know where was the student remote controlling the robots, literally. And I kept telling him, no, there is a camera overhead, there is a computer, the images are passing to the computer, they plan. And he would like not believe. This is like probably 99, but still. It was very interesting to understand that this was the thing. Hands off humans, and basically the robots processing the images, making decisions, and actually moving. These cobots is an example, and I'll just show you two things that, while doing these cobots, came about as crucial directions for AI, which we still are at the beginning of embracing. One of them is the fact that these robots have limitations. And when we'll develop the AI system as sophisticated as we want, we are going to find that our technology for vision, our technology for decision making, our technology for actuation is not as capable as we would like. And so at the beginning, you would think like these cobots could not open doors, could not take the elevator, didn't have hands. In fact, they don't have arms because of also the complication of manipulation. And basically, there was this decision of having these robots approach the problem of their limitations by asking for help. So it's kind of changed this thing of thinking they can do it all. For example, in the robot soccer, they have to do it all. No humans are allowed to give input. No humans are allowed to do anything. Here, it was a new direction. What about AI systems that know what they don't know and are capable of saying, I need help, instruct me? And that's really what I think it would be a very important direction. Another direction is the need for these robots to explain what they are doing. The need to have them be able to be accountable for their decisions and eventually being able to, in language, talk with humans about why they did things and about what they are doing. So in different levels of abstraction. So these are two directions I think are very important, the asking for help and this verbalization or being able to talk in language about their autonomy. And so I would like to involve these within our CMU AI. Is this the time to give the news or no? Okay, so this is the time to give the news, which is also within this CMU AI, we have been trying to develop, and we are trying and dedicated and committed to develop a new major in terms of education within the School of Computer Science, which will be an AI major. So students are going to be able to choose to be educated with a degree in AI. And we are very pleased to tell you that Reed Siemens, who currently is a professor in robotics, has very generously offered or volunteered or being invited to chair this effort. So he's going to be the director of the new CMU AI program. And Reed is not here because he's currently at NSF, but we thank you, Reed, and we are very happy. And so, any feedback on CMU AI or the AI major or research will be appreciated. Thanks a lot.
Hello, I am The term artificial intelligence was coined in 1955 by Herb Simon, excuse me, Alan Newell, Marvin Minsky, and John McCarthy, who then went on to the 1956 Dartmouth Conference that essentially initiated the field. It's good to have had two of the grandfathers of AI at Carnegie Mellon. MIT only had one, Stanford only had one. Herb Simon also believed that all fundamental messages should be deliverable without audiovisual aids, as you saw in the film clip that we had for him before. The pictures that you saw were added much later by us. So in his honor, I'm going to try to do the same thing, and for the next 4.5 minutes, try to define AI without the benefit of props. And that's kind of hard, actually. Well, defining AI is also kind of hard. So what is the first thing that one does? Well, we look in the web. And I found over 500 and counting different definitions of artificial intelligence. Aren't search engines great? Now, these range from AI replicating human intelligence to AI solving problems that no human ever could solve, to AI being a long laundry list of all its successes and accomplishments. And most of these definitions include the ability to learn, to perceive, to communicate, to act, sometimes even to act rationally, and so forth. But my definition of AI differs a bit from the cumulative collection of all of these. I define AI as the science and engineering of creating increasingly capable intelligent systems that help humanity. So every part of this is crucial to me: science and engineering, systems, and helping humanity. So AI is not replicating people, AI is augmenting people's intellectual reach. Now, these days, AI is hot. Everyone claims to be an AI expert, or at least an AI fan, or maybe an AI critic. In fact, there are some people that are all three. Elon Musk comes to mind. On the one hand, Musk strives to build self-driving cars. Can't deny that there's AI in there. He's a champion of space exploration. Absolute need for AI and autonomy there as well. And on the other hand, he talks about the AI apocalypse. I find this bewildering because I'm a big Elon Musk fan. I love space exploration, his environmentalism causes and so forth, but I don't quite understand them. Human intelligence understanding is probably harder than artificial intelligence. Okay, so the fundamental equation these days seems to be that AI equals big money, at least in many people's minds, and the bandwagon rolls on. Now, for all of us who have dedicated our lives to AI, this recalls a situation about 20 plus years ago in what was called the AI winter. That was precipitated by the early day expert systems, rule-based systems, overclaiming. The press was overclaiming, the venture capitalists were overbelieving or overclaiming, and even some AI practitioners participated in this somewhat overclaiming. And then there was a reaction that went way too far the other way, saying AI can't hack it. Well, AI has hacked it. We have all kinds of things, computer vision, autonomous driving, high quality speech recognition, machine translation, you name it. And there's much more to come. Champions at chess and Go and so forth. So we have to stick to the science and the engineering as AI practitioners and AI developers. And when we claim things, we have to claim their capabilities, we have to claim their generality, and we also have to acknowledge the limitations. So another way of saying it, with apologies to Lewis Carroll, is beware of the Jabberwocky with hype that bites and flaws that catch. So in other words, represent things accurately and things will go well for the field and for all of us. So let us reach out to the media, government, about the benefits, the challenges, and limits of AI. And the ultimate challenge, understanding how we understand and putting that understanding to good. To conclude, I want to give a couple of examples of having AI visions that are important. One vision by Raj Reddy, who's sitting right here, one of the very next generation after the four founders. And his vision is to create guardian angels. A guardian angel is essentially a cognitive agent that is always on, always learning, always adapting, and always helping the person. So it's helping them, for example, make sure they take care of their health, the right medicines, the exercise, whatever else is needed. Make sure that they are being constantly stimulated if necessary, providing information on an as-needed basis, and sometimes doing what the search engines can't quite do, giving you an answer before you ask. Those of you who watched MASH, long ago TV show, remember Radar O'Reilly, who had an answer before the question was asked? That's one of the capabilities of these guardian angels, anticipation. So the AI road ahead is long, but it's lined with spectacular sights and even more amazing destinations. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tuomas Sandholm. I'm sorry to miss this meeting. I'm this week spreading the word about CMU AI in Europe and China. I'm giving a talk at the AI Investment Management Conference in Amsterdam and a couple of other talks in the Netherlands. And then I'm flying to Beijing to give a talk at the JDD Discovery Conference and the AI World Conference. I have two things to follow up on. First, we are all betting on huge growth in AI around game theory, where things like automated negotiation and fair division will play a central role. For example, we are working in my group on computational advertising markets and even steering evolution and biological adaptation so as to fight diseases. Secondly, we are clearly taking the view that AI is a business, and we want to specialize in CMU AI at having huge impact commercially with AI. So if you're interested in that, do get in touch with me as well. Thanks a lot and have a great conference.
Okay, let me tell you a little bit about the dreams of the researchers in the Robotics Institute when it comes to AI and robots. And I will start with the patented Andrew Moore AI stack. It starts with perceiving the environment. It starts with trying to understand everything about the environment and being able to do so with minimal training, being able to adapt to new environment. We want to be able to map the environment. We want to be able to do so under any types of environment, under any type of condition, to be able to do that on affordable hardware that can be deployed on any robots like this drone. We need to be, thank you. We need to be able to understand people. Much of AI is not about computers or robots. It's about people. It's about interacting with people. We need to understand everything about people, their facial expression, their emotions, their intent, their body pose, their gestures. We need to be able to learn. And by that, I don't mean just learning from offline curated data. By that, I mean also being able to learn from acting in the environment, being able to learn continuously by self-supervision, learning by interacting with the environment, and being able to have systems that evolve themselves through their interaction with the environment. We need to be able to use this to make decisions. Classical example is self-driving. But by making decisions, I just don't mean staying safe, as in avoiding collision for driving. I also mean making decisions that are natural, that are the kind of decision that humans can operate with the robot. Finally, we need to act in the environment. We need to be able to have dexterous capability, being able to do detailed operation that are needed for interaction in the real world, such as this extremely important operation. We need to have the planning tools, the learning tools, the modeling tools that are able to do those kinds of operations, and have robots that are truly capable in a human environment. Yes. And finally, we need to be able to interact with the human. That means ultimately being able to have true shared autonomy. We're not talking about system replacing humans here. We're talking about system giving new skills to humans, enabling things that were never, ever possible before. This is an example here of an AI system that is combined with a direct brain interface on a tetraplegic person, giving this person for the first time the ability to grasp objects, to open doors, to open bottles and things like this. Things that she cannot do because she's tetraplegic, she cannot even do with the state-of-the-art brain-machine interface. By combining this with the AI system, everything that I showed you before, being able to see, being able to plan, being able to predict the intent of the person, we are now able to help and to work, to have a system that works with her to enable her to do something that she would never, ever be able to do. Now, what we want to do finally is to be able to put this together into systems that actually work and actually work with people. And there is probably one of the biggest challenges is to be able to make systems like this that are safe, that have provable performance, that are trusted. How to do this is still an enormous endeavor, and those are the kind of things that we dream of doing. And that's all I wanted to say.
So what we're going to do next is we've asked a few people from many different parts of campus to come and just give examples of things which they would regard as an important moonshot, important activity that many people over the campus might be able to get involved with, to do the full-scale CMU thing like we did with self-driving, like we did with game theory, like we did with many other areas where CMU at its best gets faculty and students together from across the campus to build significant things. And we're going to ask this whole group in our structured information finding session for ideas and concepts, and then we will help make sure that we all triage down to some big moonshots. But to get this started and to get the creative juices flowing, Manuela is going to be running a panel now where folks discuss these questions. I now hereby introduce the panel. Sorry. Oh, very good. Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So, please.
Okay, good.
You can MC this.
Thank you. Very good. So, we are going to have Elizabeth home telling us a little bit about material science and engineering. So and then we have Christopher Genovese telling us about statistics and data science, and George Cantor in the Robotics Institute, and then Rachel Mandelbaum is going to talk with us about the astrophysics and cosmology, I guess. So why don't we start with you, Rachel?
Okay, can you hear me in the back? Okay. Okay, so before I talk about the moonshot idea, for which I do have a slide, yes. I wanted to give the quick 1-minute pitch for why people interested in AI should care about cosmology in general. So there are a few reasons for this. So the first one is cosmology is a field with a huge amount of discovery potential. We have a lot of basic physics questions, things like, what is all the stuff in the universe today? So the things that you see around you that you think of as normal matter, those are only 5% of the universe. The rest of the universe is dark matter and dark energy, and we don't have a good theory to describe that. So large sky surveys that will be going on in the next couple of decades are going to have the potential to answer these really basic fundamental questions like, what is 95% of the universe? Those data sets are tremendously complicated. They're very large data sets. They have a lot of things going on in them. They essentially have a very high dimensionality. And so that is, of course, a ripe area for AI to help us develop better methods to analyze that data. If we want to learn about our science, then we don't just need data, we need theoretical predictions to compare it to. And it turns out that in cosmology, the theory predictions are also big data, because the only way to make theoretical predictions for what the universe should look like, given some assumptions about physics, is to run a simulation where we evolve the universe forward from some early time and see what it looks like. And these are very high resolution, high volume simulations. So our theory is big data and our data is big data, essentially. And then we have this difficult problem of bringing them together to try to learn about physics. So that bringing them together stage is another place where there's a lot of room for AI to lead to improvements in our understanding. So that was my quick pitch for why all of you should join the many of us already in the McWilliams Center for Cosmology in working on cosmology. But now I'm going to talk about this moonshot idea. So just to set the stage, the LSST survey is a survey that's going to look at the southern sky, all visible parts of the southern sky, over a period of 10 years. And unlike current surveys, which tend to do that by looking at each part of the sky a few times, 5 times, 10 times, and then add those images together, the LSST survey is going to look at each part of the sky roughly 1,000 times, and then add all those images together. So if you imagine that happening in a 10-year period, then the LSST survey is going to look at every single point on the southern sky roughly once every 3 days, 4 days, something like that. So if you imagine astrophysical processes that are happening that are a function of time, like there's a supernova, this is an explosion that something very bright suddenly appears and then it fades over a period of a few weeks, the LSST survey is going to be amazingly powerful at finding these kinds of transient events due to a huge variety of physical processes. So LSST is basically a transient machine. And if you crunch the numbers based on its observing strategy for how many transients it should identify every night, it's about 10 million per night. So that's 10 million events that will have to be identified, classified as to what could be causing them, and then triaged for observation using other follow-up instruments so that we can actually do our science. So we've never had a challenge. Our field has never had a challenge even remotely near this scale before. We're going to be drinking from a fire hose. And we don't yet have the methods of identification and classification to enable us to really do that. So just to give you some examples of discovery potential, the top right figure up there is an artist illustration of 2 neutron stars merging, which you may have seen on the front page of the New York Times a couple of weeks ago, because there was a discovery of gravitational waves using the LIGO experiment. And then a huge number of telescopes looked at the place they thought it came from over a period of few hours, and they found that there were gamma rays being emitted and optical radiation, and they identified this as the aftermath of 2 neutron stars merging, which had never been identified before. And this was sort of the birth of the field of multi-messenger astronomy, gravitational waves, and optical follow-up, which we expect will have great discovery potential in the 2020s when LSST is online. Okay, so that's the distant universe, faraway galaxies. There's also great discovery potential just inside of our own solar system. LSST will be amazing at mapping out all of the near-Earth objects above a certain size. We'll know much more about what's happening in our solar system than we did before, once we have LSST data. Okay, and I mentioned these few examples, but actually the point I wanted to make is that when people in my field think about what LSST is going to do, so it's going to be a tremendously rich data set that's going to have an impact in many areas. But if you ask, do we think there's room for any surprises, for us to learn something completely new that we never expected? Most people will tell you that probably the best potential for a big splash and for us to learn something that really surprises us is in this time domain science. So my challenge to you is that we should develop the methods we need to really handle this time series of images with this incredible data rate and identify the transients and classify them to make the next big discovery in time domain astronomy. Thank you.
Wow, amazing. So I ask a question. So based on these enormous amounts of data that eventually will support, hopefully, discoveries, are there kind of decision-making choices that people will have to take based on what the data will provide? Will the data support any decisions that people, scientists and governments and all sorts of like other people, stakeholders are involved?
Well, it depends what kinds of decisions you mean, but in general, the expectation is that when it comes to the time domain science, there will be groups that are called event brokers that take that vast stream of possible transients and do additional classification. They run algorithms to try to classify them and try to understand, is this potentially a near-Earth object that we should try to follow up with this kind of telescope? Is this an interesting cosmological object which might require a totally different kind of follow-up? Maybe it's just an airplane flying overhead and we should ignore it. So there's a lot of classification that has to happen. And then, yes, there are strategic decisions about how to use your limited follow-up resources to actually learn about all the different things you could learn from it.
Thank you very much. So maybe George can tell us a little bit about your moonshot.
Sure. So I have a slide also. It doesn't matter if it goes up or not. We have a problem that's motivating us, and the problem is this. I don't want anyone to panic, but in 20 or 30 years, if the trends continue, there's not going to be enough food to feed everyone on the planet. Population is growing. Food production rates are growing, but they're not growing fast enough to keep up with population. This is going to be especially critical in the developing world, in places like sub-Saharan Africa, where the population is growing faster, and issues like climate change and the way they produce their food there, the fact that Western agriculture has this big industrialized base where people are growing one kind of corn that can be grown all over North America. In Africa, there's many different production systems, there's different cultural regimes, there's different climates, and the climate is changing. And so the big industrial ag systems are not going to solve the problems in sub-Saharan Africa. So there's a lot of different ways you can look at this problem. It's a huge problem that many people from many disciplines are working on. There's social issues, there's economic issues, there's governmental and policy issues. But looking at it from an AI perspective, I like to think about what can we do. And one of the things that we can do right now with robots, and getting even better going forward, is that we can collect data in agricultural environments to a degree with an order of magnitude, resolution, and accuracy that has never been possible before. So this involves intelligent robots out in fields, driving around, looking at things, starting to manipulate and control things. So we can collect this wealth of data about how plants grow. Another revolution that's happened recently that at least those of us in robotics may not be that aware of is that over the past decade or so, the price of doing genetic sequencing has gone down by multiple orders of magnitude, to the point where it's really inexpensive to get gene sequences of plants. So now let's take these two facts and let's look at the way we grow plants. The way we breed plants is a breeder just grows a bunch of different varieties of plants and evaluates them, looks at the genetics of them, tries to understand this huge dimensional space of the genetics crossed with what we call the phonetics, the phenotypic varieties of the plant, what the plant looks like. And they try to understand this, and they try to use this to make this decision of what are the best two parents to try in the next round. Currently, the bottleneck in that is the data collection, the phenotyping, which is where the intelligent robots and data gathering come in. But when you look forward, once we have this data, we have huge challenges in understanding it. So there's a machine learning component, there's a large bioinformatics component. So the punchline is using robotics and data science to make better plants so that we can have better plants that can start to address this problem of feeding the world. We have a moonshot, an SCS moonshot called FarmView, which is broadly addressing using these technologies for agriculture, and in particular looking into breeding crops that will be suitable for the developing world.
Perfect. So, very nice. I do have a small question. So, do you think that these particular kind of like reaching out to agriculture will, our students, our undergrad population, our grad students will have to know about agriculture? So
that's a really good question. And the answer is yes, somewhat. Okay. What they really need to know is how to work with people in agriculture. These problems are so complex that no one person can possibly have all the expertise that's necessary. So we need people who understand genetics. We need people who understand plant physiology. We need people who understand crop production and the economics of it. We're not going to get that from within the Robotics Institute. But what we can do is we can train our students to find those kinds of people, and to, once they find them, communicate with them in order to solve these bigger problems.
Yeah, so this is a great example of also the interdisciplinary approach, both to education, research, solving problems, of what we would like CMU AI to embrace. Thanks a lot, George. Chris.
Thanks. I have to admit, I'm excited about the idea of a moonshot, but I'm still holding out for the full-on moon base. So I want to start just by covering a few projects that are either ongoing or just starting out that I think give a flavor of how what we're doing in statistics and data science intersects with this effort, and then talk about just a couple aspirational challenges, which I think are broader. To start, and a big effort with statisticians, neuroscientists, computer scientists, and many others is poised on the cusp of a revolution in understanding the brain and in developing new treatments for brain disorders. And central to that effort is an ability to understand the flow of information in the complex network that constitutes the brain, using all the different modalities of data. It's not clear yet how well positioned we are to solve this right now, but as a moonshot, certainly this is an effort that's ongoing. Another situation where we have vastly different kinds of data and very large amounts of data comes in education. Students are increasingly dealing with online educational environments, which gives us a real rich snapshot of what they're doing. We have two research groups involved in efforts with building systems that are being used all over the country and elsewhere, where we're getting massive amounts of data of students in different situations, different domains, different classes, and we're trying to use modeling and other approaches to learn what those students understand and then take actionable steps. But the moonshot angle is to go beyond that and to have the system learn something about the domain itself, so that our representation of how to understand how students learn gets better, and our representation of how to teach actually gets better. We can see the interactions going on in a whole bunch of different classrooms. How do we learn what works and what doesn't? Another effort has to do with understanding disease. Traditional epidemiology has been very successful in many ways. Recent efforts have been mining data like social network data to predict disease outcomes, disease flow. There's an effort involved with people in machine learning and statistics, and again with others, in using new kinds of data, seemingly less relevant data. Just for example, Uber, imagine you had all the images from Uber capturing pictures of the scene on the street. Can you predict the onset of epidemics or flu season from that? And that gives just a bit of a flavor. Most of our efforts are involved in dealing with complicated data sets, usually in massive interdisciplinary collaborations. I think there are a couple cross-cutting concerns, though. I think of them as aspirational challenges for us, which I wanted to mention. The first is dealing with uncertainty. I think of that as central to what we do. Whether we're doing predictive problems, where we just want to do prediction, whether you're doing inference, where you want to understand something about a system, or even attempt to say something about causality, getting an assessment of uncertainty is really important. There are problems where you can get really good estimates of what's going on, but that mathematically you can show it's very difficult to assess uncertainty. And that becomes even more difficult when we're dealing with implicit systems that are harder to understand, where the computations are already at our limit. A second thing has to deal with interaction with humans. And this comes down, I think, to a degree, to the utility of models. We've seen the power of raw data with good algorithms to be able to produce effective results. But there's still value in people understanding what is happening, both the production of those, the production of those systems. For example, AlphaGo has been a big success in understanding Go, and it's interesting to hear expert Go players talk about it as though an alien is making those moves, because their understanding of what's happening and what the model's producing isn't so clear. How do we help people take those outcomes and get a model, a framework for understanding and improving in that way? And at the same time, how do we build in prior information, things that we know? In that educational problem, we have good mechanistic models for how people learn. Are those models useful in making things work better? or is the data going to overwhelm everything? And finally, I guess I'll just call it propriety. We've had a long history where ideas that are useful in some technical sense end up propagating into society, and I'll use p-values as an example, that have done a lot of harm. P-values are a way of drawing, characterizing the results of inferences in scientific studies, and things have gone awry in terms of the understanding and the use of p-values throughout society. Well, in a lot of the kinds of problems we're dealing with, from classification to inference, the methods out there are going to be even more powerful, more implicit, and subject to more abuse. How do we construct methods that are not only understandable but more robust to the kinds of misuses that don't lead to unfairness or injustice?
Wow. So in fact, our statistics is kind of these masters. They are masters of processing data. So it will be a fantastic kind of like involvement in having computing and science and problems of relevance to society being addressed in conjunction with the statistics at all levels, right?
Yeah, I actually think that feedback between what we can understand in an abstract sense and what happens on the ground and actual applied problems helps both sides.
Exactly. Thanks, Chris.
Sure.
Elizabeth.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Elizabeth Holm from the Department of Materials Science and Engineering. In CIT, I guess I'm the engineering emissary to this panel. And I'm not going to solve world hunger, and I'm not going to find out the answer to the question of life, the universe, and everything, or cure all diseases. But I do want to bring to your attention something that befuddled me when I came here to CMU about 5 years ago. So I'm a computational materials scientist, and I was trained in computer science. And I came here from the National Lab System in part because I was eager to take on some of these new computer science-based techniques and challenges, including machine learning, data science, and I do so in my work. But one of the things that surprised me when I got here was that my fellow engineers and physical scientists were not jumping on this bandwagon. We're not implementing data science and machine learning and artificial intelligence and computer intelligence with the same eagerness that non-scientists, non-engineers were doing so. And this was surprising to me because we are a group who are trained and comfortable with computers. We're trained and comfortable with statistics. Admittedly, the p-value problem might be a challenge for us. We also know the limitations of statistics and inferences. We're comfortable with data in general. So why aren't we using it more? And the answer came to me in a different aspect because Professor Newell Washburn and I ran a CMU workshop on machine learning in science and engineering here at CMU last spring. And I took an informal poll of the participants, about 20 professors of physical science and engineering, and asked, open-ended question, what are the barriers to your implementing these methods? And we got lots of answers, and some of the answers said our data is very big. Some of the answers said our data is actually very small, but it may be small but very rich. Some said that they had data that was multimodal. All these are challenges that are being addressed in the data science community. These should not have been showstoppers. The one thing that everybody said, though, at technically 90% of the respondents said without prompting, they don't know how to interpret these models. And until we can interpret the outcome of a data science-based or a machine learning-based system, as scientists and engineers, we have a very limited application for that. There are indeed science and engineering problems that are okay with plug in the data, get out an answer, and act upon it. But most of our challenges don't work that way. Most of the time, in engineering, for example, we have a legal liability that we have to meet. We actually are licensed professionals like medical doctors or lawyers. We aren't allowed to say, by those whom we report to, those whom we are liable to, we are not allowed to say, I can do this because the computer says so. We have to prove that the method has the right reason for saying that. Likewise, in physical sciences, it's not enough to say, I predict that this is the outcome of this experiment. our goal, our reason for being is to predict the outcome of all the experiments, and to do so based on physical laws, not upon data correlations. And this was the thing that was sort of both psychologically and practically holding back the physical scientists and engineers from fully adopting these powerful methods. And then upon further discussion, I think the biggest thing that came up about why the interpretability problem is so hard in physical sciences and engineering is because the domain expert in data science, machine learning, and AI is not a domain expert in physical sciences and engineering, and vice versa. And I would actually propose that it's easier for a physical scientist or engineer to learn the data science part, because we are fairly used to numbers and math and computing, than it is for a computer scientist, for example, to have to learn about the many-body Schrodinger equation, for example. And so this is a challenge that echoes, I think, what all of my fellow panelists have said, is that the way that we're going to progress forward with these powerful methods it has to be by developing interdisciplinary relationships where the domain expert in physical sciences and engineering can be responsible for teaching the necessary components of physical sciences and engineering. The data scientists can be responsible for that part. And it's the meeting in the middle that's going to be tricky, because in order to interpret data that involves the many-body Schrodinger equation, someone's got to understand what they're looking for in terms of the evidence of the physics of the many-body Schrodinger equation in that data. And that seems to be a big roadblock. And so I don't have a moonshot per se. However, I am working with my colleagues to put together a response to an NSF Science and Technology Center call around this topic. And it may not be as bold sounding as world hunger, but it's something that I think is a critical link to really bringing the data science, artificial intelligence, computer intelligence into the realm where we're designing vehicles, where we're interpreting the universe, where we are making decisions about drug discovery and so on, to really take the usefulness of this incredible field to a different domain. So thank you.
Definitely. So in fact, you are mentioning and you are highlighting a great challenge that also the data scientists and the machine learners and the AI researchers face, which is to, instead of just solving problems, which we have been in the business of solving problems for a long time, also explaining eventually where does that solution come from. So I do believe that that's a great moonshot in some sense, challenging the machines to explain themselves better.
Exactly. And it's very much how we've always done science, right? Is this question of data is gathered and data is interpreted into some framework that is broader than the data itself. And that's what we're really trying to do, is make that next step. We gather data, we interpret the data, we make predictions, but now to make it really science, to make it engineering, we have to put that in the broader framework of the physical laws and principles that we know govern the data in our fields.
Very good, thank you. I don't know if we open for any questions, or Andrew?
What I'd like to do now is questions for the panel. We'll do about 5 minutes of that, and then we'll get some bigger questions.
Okay. So there we go. My dean tells. Questions to the panel. Any questions to the panel? Yes.
So, in terms of bioscience, the genomics collaboration, are you collaborating all across Oakland, all across the world, with competing mathematics facilities for this, or just within CMU?
So the question was, what's the scope of our collaboration on the bioinformatics and genetics side? Is it, nationally within Pittsburgh and within CMU? Right now we have collaborations nationally. We work with a lot of the other land-grant universities. We're working with the Danforth Plant Science Center in St. Louis. We recently are trying to get some of that expertise and build those relationships locally. So Rebecca Dorsch, who's the MCS dean, has a very strong background, luckily, in that area, and she's helping us forge some relationships there. Of course, there are people, the Lane Center has got bioinformatics, and machine learning department has the statistics skills. So we're out. I mean, part of being here right now is to kind of put out a call to broaden that team and get those skills in place.
Thank you. Up there? Yes.
to, I think, Liz, too.
Hi, Erica.
I think you're far too modest. And so since I don't do the incredible work you're doing, I just do policy, I'm going to argue that you have, in terms of what you're doing, material science could solve climate change through, for example, solar or battery or other renewable energy technologies which are based in material science, as well as metal additive manufacturing, what you're doing for lightweighting, massive lightweighting of airplanes and others. Fluidics, it could also solve health problems, and it also could solve military and war problems, as well as it underlies in hardware the AI stack itself. So that was it.
Thank you, Erica. But I do want to, I appreciate the enthusiasm, but I do want to say, well, materials science and engineering is an underlying and foundational engineering discipline because everything's made out of something. In reality, those challenges are definitely interdisciplinary, and we need the physicists and the chemists and the biologists and all the other engineering disciplines that we all need to do this together.
Thank you. Any other question? Yes, please, Chris.
So we could be in the business of facilitating big data and explaining things, watching the stars. There are other examples, something called the Smart Cube system that Jeff Schneider was involved in, which basically said, okay, we instrument a bunch of rats and we can do massive drug testing. We could either say we're going to do that ourselves or we're going to facilitate mass adoption of these things. In the case of drug testing, the system ended up being proprietary. Those people want to own those ways of doing things. So I'm wondering what's the right strategy. If you say, okay, we're going to do big data or help the world do big data, does that mean we do more big data ourselves and we hold people's hands or what?
Well, I don't know exactly what each one of us would answer, but I do believe that somehow AI is about trying to solve problems, and the examples of the moonshots or ideas people have will help us understand in general how to do much better the AI, the general AI. So we will be big data people, we'll do big decision making, we'll do big actuators, big perception, will be components of that big picture eventually. But Chris again. We can talk about these offline.
I think we should potentially get ahead of the game and announce the era of big data is over, and we're going to actually go for real intelligence.
That's good. We'll announce it now. The era of big data is over, and we are going to work on big intelligence. Thanks. Katya, please. Last one.
So this whole discussion brings an issue about the top-down versus bottom-up. Please make that very clear, right? Because in order to interpret data, you need to have a theory, a theoretical framework within which to interpret. Right? So up now, science has progressed mostly by theories. Talking about the gravitational wave theory, general relativity and so on, was many, many years before the gravitational waves were actually found. So people thought theoretically about these things called gravitational waves. They developed the theory, they developed the waves, and so on. And then lo and behold, later on, and so on, they were discovered. So the question now is, so up now, in the priority in some sense, was theory development. And then the experiment was sort of to validate or falsify whatever the theory, but the theory was there. Now we are turning the other way. And some conferences and so on, there are panels and talking about the end of theory and so on and so forth. And so I think there needs to be a balance, and for people to understand, and for us to also, as AI and data scientists or whatever, to talk about that, because we need to have balance. And also then the question exactly for AI, is it possible to help develop scientific fields? And of course, if we see here at CMU, new students like Brad Landy, for example, right? They had the scientists, and there was this project that Brad did his thesis on, which was about developing an AI system that would help science, that would generate or somehow scientific. And I think this is another interesting challenge if we're talking about going beyond, naming or helping or holding hands and so on, beyond the data thing and say, okay, then we now develop the things to help deal with that. Because I think that would be
Very nice. I would agree completely with that. That is certainly an active area of research. There was the recent high-profile paper in Science or Nature, I can't remember which, about developing the math of the coupled harmonic oscillator using machine learning, an unsolved problem. And the Eureka software is based on developing theory out of data. I think that's an absolutely huge potential area for benefit. And I would also say that this is what inspires scientists, and no one wants to be just a number cruncher who goes into physics.
Very nice. So please join me in thanking the panelists.
Okay, here's what happens next. For the remaining time, we're going to get your help in figuring out how to properly organize ourselves. What we're trying to do here is not have some secret committee deciding how we're going to do CMU AI. We really do want to hear from the faculty and especially the students and postdocs about what they believe we should be focusing on. Because that's how CMU has always succeeded, is by actual faculty and students getting together and building stuff. So we plan to send out pretty simple questions. Everyone in this room, I demand you just send me an email saying, I'm interested, or I was here, or you can just leave it blank. That way we can then send you out a bunch of questions about what you aspire to get out of a set of coordinated activities about AI on campus. The kind of questions we're envisioning are, we might ask you, which other parts of this AI stack do you wish you knew people in? Do you wish you had a good friend who was an expert in deep learning? Do you wish you had a friend who could teach you how to not screw up p-values, which is a very dangerous thing. So that's one class of question. Another class of question is, shall we have a sort of decision process to maybe find 3 or 4 things on campus, with examples being the kinds of things you heard about today, where we're going to get folks together for it. If you do that, that really helps people like me and Jim Garrett and Rebecca Dersh and department heads, because we can do coordinate focus to get resources for you. We have a very excited board of trustees who wants to help us. We have these days now, thanks to the great reputation of CMU, we have the ear of government, and we have many organizations saying we'd like to work with CMU. What I'd love to get out of this exercise is our CMU's opinion of what we want to do as a community. So we'll ask you that question. There's a few other things, like some people have suggested that we should make sure that we actually do good data science on campus, where we can present to the outside world information about who on campus is interested in doing machine learning for manufacturing, who is interested in doing active learning for emergency room triage, so that we can get some information from you like that, so that our business development people in our various colleges can be a matching service and do a better job of getting people together with companies. So my question to you now is, are there other things that we should be other questions we should be answering to you all? Other things that you've seen today which you think are particularly important? Or are there things which you're kind of horrified that so far we've missed out from discussing? please hit me with questions. Chris Atkinson is our official question answer. I also just want to say something. Sorry to do this to you, Chris. Chris in 1990 was the guy saying, you can't do autonomy without learning models of the world. And I fell under his spell, and he has been so proved right. That's exactly what's happening at the moment. So congratulations on that.
So I was talking to a potential faculty candidate yesterday, and I asked him, what would attract you to CMU? And he said a super collider. We need to get serious about building an AI super collider. And at a practical level, that means we have to get the resources to basically have a AI system. I want it to be a robot. We can argue about the details, but it's got to be running 24/7. It's got to, have a lifetime of months, if not years. We are falling behind our competitors, which now include Google, Facebook, and everybody else, in sort of the size of resources we can bring to bear on a problem, and the continuity and the notion that there's a thing that everybody's focused on. So the question I'd like you to answer in your thing is, if we were to build a multi-million-dollar CMU AI super collider, what would you want it to be?
I think it's an excellent point. Just to summarize what I think you're communicating is we cannot do abstract AI. We want to have things that we can point to which say, look, that's the CMU AI system going around and shooting dogs that poop on our grass. But it's absolutely true that I and the rest of us in leadership are always fighting to get the best people in the world here. We're not going to get them if we just say it's a nice community. So we'll, unless I hear objections, we will put something like this. What piece of infrastructure? Is it a large robot? Is it a very automated robotic bioscience lab where you can run active learning? Is it actual ownership of part of the LSST pipeline? Which things like this do you think we should be investigating in addition to potential retries?
So, past example.
You get like 5 more seconds.
Past example, we're wiring the campus and wirelessly wiring the campus.
Yes, exactly. And the one laptop for everyone, I completely agree. We've got to stay ahead. Thank you.
So, we keep talking about what's a good solution, what's a good system to say like CMU AI did this. But I think like as a machine learning scientist, I believe all the cases that we don't have a platform where I can go and see like, I want to solve a food crisis. What's an important sub-problem within this massive like big problem that I can tackle that would be helpful for that particular problem? Like, it would be nice to have a platform where domain experts can actually go and say like, we're trying to solve this massive problem. These are things you could help us with that actually will have an impact. Because when I look at problems, I look at them, I pick something that I feel is important. I might solve it, but maybe that's not important at all. Like, it's hard to know what actually will have an impact in those bigger problems from an outsider perspective.
I think that's a really strong point. I very, very much want us to be good at doing this on campus. And your point mainly, I think, is we can be inspired near the top of the stack to do great applications based on what we see with technologies coming out of the statistics department or new hardware capabilities of an HPC search engine or something like that. But, and I was very much in your position when I was at a stage of my career where I was actually like a real scientist, where I know I could build the fastest clustering algorithm in the world, but who up there will really need it? So if amongst us we can, through the use of publishing that we're interested in or what we're expert in, if we can set it up so that we get those communications and links made, I think that could be one of the most important things we can do. Thank you. Yes?
So I think software is one of the only industries that has more viable cases. That's changing by all accounts. once that happens, what's the implication for AI and deep learning and everything else?
Thank you. That was a really good question. The fact is that, especially against internet companies, they have got away without much government regulation, and then we can have a long debate about whether that's good or bad. But the Facebook methodology of let's do quick, nimble launches, throw it out there, see what breaks and fix it. That is, as Liz put it, completely unethical about anything which is safety critical. And even without the safety critical, you could still cause massive societal harm by having a machine learning system which actually does make decisions using what we would regard as either illegal or unethical characteristics of a person. So these are important things, and my personal belief is that the large AI corporations at the moment are likely to somewhat drag their heels on this. And it is going to be, the government will look to smart institutions like our own to be sensible about this. So I am very excited that we have such strong policy organizations on campus that with the help of Elon Morbash and David Danks and a large team of folks, there are people working on some of these questions. And this is my personal editorial. I really hope that we CMU are not only the place which points out that there's a problem, but we're also the place which comes up with solutions. And we do have a loud megaphone right now. Many of the people you see sitting here in the front row are routinely called upon by the federal government to help them figure this out. So let's be the people who actually give advice to the rest of society. So thank you very much for that comment. And maybe afterwards we can discuss whether there's some part of the question we send out to everyone that can be incorporated here. Thank you.
So this is a question directly to Dr. Veloso. The field of ML, not maybe not AI at large, but ML is undergoing rapid democratization. And I think that's leading to a lot of misinformation, a lot of just bad ML all around. So how can we, as CMU, lead education K-12, media, and local and global communities in the field of ML and AI?
That's the hardest question we've been asked so far, so I'm delighted for Namal to answer it.
So, it's a difficult question, but I do want to mention one thing that was very striking when I visited the United Nations for some meeting on AI for good. There was this moment when books became in 1400 became printed, that there was a shift in education in which reading became part of what people had to learn. Until then, there was no need to read, even like for children to read. I think that we are reaching a point where we have to tell our K through 12, our children, that computing and understanding AI is a skill that people need to acquire. And it's not something that's going to be acquired later, but needs to be acquired sooner. So we are in this process. Unfortunately, the history of the world does not tell us well how the reading kind of skill was transitioned from the 1400s to the 1500s. Neither do we know when writing became a required skill. But we don't know if it was top-down, bottom-up. We don't know very much. But definitely we will be, as CMU AI, involved in this and reaching out to schools, to K through 12, and reaching out to everyone. So I believe, if I think 100 years from now, that computing and understanding the basics of machinery and AI will be part of the skills that everybody needs to study. How we get there, I don't know. But definitely, that's an excellent question.
All right,
okay,
thank you. We're actually out of time now.
Yes.
I want to do one final quick plug, which is that Randy Bryant, my predecessor, sitting here, is thinking very hard about what computational low-level architectures we need to do to help with our dreams of artificial intelligence. What's different now that we're doing big optimization, big perception, as well as big start-stack machine learning? So please ping Randy if you're interested in that question. Right now, my instructions to you are really simple. You're going to have to do it. You can send me or any of the panelists here long, detailed messages of your thoughts. That would be welcome. You'll get another chance for that later. Right now, I just ask that either now or in the next 15 minutes, just send a message to awm@cs.cmu.edu. It's my email address saying I'm interested. Don't worry about my email inbox getting flooded and me not being able to cope. I can use artificial intelligence to do this.
Good.
So, thank you so much for coming today, and we will now have a reception in Rangos 3.
Very good.